Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of We Talk Photo. I am, of course, John Peterson, and with me, as always, is Jack North
Of
Face
course,
Graham.
Graham. Good morning from rainy Tennessee.
It's
We
actually
had
raining
thunder,
out here in
lightning,
Oregon as
and
well. It was kind of rare to see that
all
today.
sorts of stuff. Yeah, I saw there was snow up on Rainier last weekend.
Yeah, up by your old house, there was flooding out here and hail, and it was just kind of some crazy weather. So it's going to be an interesting summer, I think. Yeah,
So,
it'll be good.
so. So
Yeah. So,
we have a
folks,
really cool guest
today
today.
we have a wonderful, wonderful guest, somebody I'm excited to talk to, somebody who I don't know very well, but we have kind of been following each other on social media, and I asked her to come on the program today so we could introduce to you her fantastic work. So, without further ado, let's welcome Rain Hayes. How you doing, Rain?
Good morning. I'm doing great. How are you guys doing?
We're doing good. Both Rain and I are on the West Coast, so we're still waking up a little bit so we can accommodate Jack's schedule. Because
I have a big schedule. I actually work today. John, you'll be happy to know that I wrote a blog entry today. John
wow.
was giving me a bad time because we moved, Rain, from the Northwest to Tennessee, and we're just getting to the point now where things are settling down. And I hadn't done a blog post since I moved, but I did one today, and it's my reaction to AI. You'll enjoy it.
I'm
Yeah.
sure I will.
Now,
It's funny. So
we
Rain,
don't know
you're
each
you're
other,
here
Rain,
on
but
the
you'll.
West Coast as well, which is great.
Yes.
West Coast is the best coast in
Yeah,
my
I'm here.
opinion, but that's my opinion only.
I don't have a coast here.
No, you don't. You're
You're
what you
a coastal.
yes, he's a
I'm
coastal.
bi-coastal. Of course, today you could probably be that way.
Yes.
Maybe I could start a whole new thing.
Just give it a few years.
Yeah, yeah,
I'll
a
be
few
I'll
months.
You'll be on
I'll
the
be
coast soon
interested
enough.
to see when Jack starts wishing for the ocean. Because I have to see it about every
That's
month.
true.
Yeah,
That is true. That is
yeah,
going to
it'll
be a
be
Or
fact.
just
interesting.
tall mountains. The Smokies are a
I
little
I look
older, a
I
little
look out
lower.
my windows here and I look at hmm, they call them mountains. That mountain up there is about 4,000 feet,
It's a
and we're only
foothill.
20 miles away. We have a great
Yeah.
view. Well, thank you for
So
being here. I'm excited to hear about your stuff. And you know John much better than you know me, but I did do a little research. I
Oh.
call the FBI and the Department of Justice and everybody, and it's okay. We all know. I'm only kidding. I did look at your website, and we say this to a lot of people. We typically, I don't know, John, other than you and I, everybody we've had on are really good photographers, and your work is exceptionally good. Thank you for taking some time to be here, and
yeah, for sure.
Well,
So
that's
get to
Rain,
know
very,
each other.
very kind. Thank you.
Sure, it's great.
why don't you just sort of introduce yourself to our audience real quick? Who are you and what are you about?
I ask myself those questions every day
Uh-huh.
and every night. So my name is Rain Hayes. I live in beautiful Oakland, California. I'm right here on Lake Merritt. You can kind of see this glare coming from my window because we are having a rare sunny June morning, and the sun just reflects off the lake into my windows like a laser beam. I love it.
It's a great area.
Um, it is really beautiful. And Jack, you know this area
Yeah,
because we were talking earlier about you had spent some time somewhere between Sacramento and San Francisco airports,
yeah, yep.
and that whole area, like the Diablo foothills, is all so beautiful. I spend a lot of time out there,
Talk
and a
about
lot of my
green.
photos are from there.
In the
Yeah,
spring,
well,
man,
for a few
John,
weeks.
it's Palouse green up there. I mean,
Hmm.
Mount Diablo area, it's just unbelievable. It's so green.
Yeah.
It's
Um,
beautiful.
so I'm here doing mainly infrared photography, something I ran across a few years ago and became very taken with very quickly, to the point that it's really hard for me to actually take color photos now. I just can't get enough of walking around looking through my viewfinder in this beautiful like sepia and white or sepia and ice blue world. It's just such a great experience. And so I've been recently expanding into helping other people learn how to do this as well and selling some prints on my website, doing some blog posts, podcasts now and then. So that's what I'm up to.
You're going to start teaching workshops? You should.
That silence you hear is my brain processing that question for myself.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I would like to do that. I've never been on somebody else's workshop, so I'm not sure exactly what to expect there. And maybe I should attend one of John's workshops in the Palouse.
Great
and
IR
see
location.
how the pros do it.
We'll both be there next year. I begged Detta this year due to the move, but that's another thing I miss is beside the ocean is the green and the blues.
Yeah.
It's green as hell here, but it's different, and it's a great place to learn how to see. It really is.
Well, Jack and I are going to be in the Eastern Sierras in the fall this year.
Yeah.
Nice.
We'll talk.
It'll be fun. Go ahead, Rain.
I was just going to say, I spent a few years in North Carolina, like 100 years ago. And I think that some of the terrain and the greenness and the weather are a little bit similar to where you're at, Jack. And it is really beautiful. And it's like the greener it is, the more opportunity you have for infrared. But it can be like a lot of white on white on white when everything is so green. But I'm really interested to see the work that you start doing in your new location and how it's different from those.
Well, I've been coming here for 30 years. I just haven't played around here in infrared at all. Again, we were talking, folks, that you just don't pick up a camera and have it converted to infrared and go out and start clicking the shutter. It's not going to work. And maybe we can get Rain, explain maybe the differences between infrared photography and non-infrared photography, how you think, and you can't do it all in an hour, but just maybe 5 or 6 little ideas on what the difference is and what goes into it.
So infrared light is all around us. It comes from the sun, but it is outside the visible spectrum. So we can't see it, but digital cameras and some films are very sensitive to infrared light and can capture that light and translate it into images. And what that looks like typically is an infrared image will have a lot of contrast, like sky and water are really dark. Anything that is green and photosynthesizes is just going to be like glowing white. So you end up with these kind of ethereal, dreamy looking landscapes that are kind of familiar, but also a little bit strange. Black and white is a wonderful use of infrared because of those effects. You can also do color infrared. It's false color. It's mostly in the post-processing. But if you've seen pictures of like pink cotton candy trees and bright yellow hills and things like that, that's probably infrared. So it's a very different aesthetic, and you want to take those special characteristics that it has and kind of exploit those and really understand those characteristics and how to kind of create them and use them to make the image something different from what you'd normally see.
So you spend a lot of your time looking at tonalities around you to see what might provide good contrast in IR?
Contrast in infrared is probably the trickiest thing. Sometimes images can have too much contrast, and it's really hard to tell until you get back into the studio and start processing them. And you get a little ways with your infrared processing with that image before you realize whether it's amazing or total garbage. It can be really hard to tell, but what I like to do is kind of target certain conditions. We don't get a lot of rain here in the Bay Area. And when we do have a rainstorm and you have thunderheads either moving in or moving out, those are the best times to go out in the hills, especially in the East Bay where I live. And you get this light and shadow across the hills and over these grassy knolls with the lone oak tree on top, and you get such a variety of light, and it's constantly changing while you're out there, so you're just clicking away and everything is going to be awesome. That's kind of my ideal day of with infrared, because you're getting a huge variety of light. A kind of a nice thing about infrared is you can shoot in the middle of the day on a bright, sunny day and still get really nice images. Whereas with regular visible light color photography, you want to be out in the morning and the evening and maybe skip over the midday and go take a nap or do something else. In infrared, you can get some really nice images in that midday if you want to take advantage of that really sharp contrast.
Yeah,
I've seen software that theoretically you can convert an image to infrared, and it just never looks the same. I don't think software comes close to what actually comes out of a camera that's been converted for infrared.
I totally agree with that, because you can, of course, take any photo and do a color swap so that you have pink trees now, but it's lacking that reflected infrared light that gives it kind of that internal brightness. There is also sometimes almost like a halo around things. Like I like to do close-up botanical photography, and flower petals and leaves that transmit light as well as reflect it just have this halo. It's almost hard to focus on them because there's so much light coming off of them. And that's something that you just can't really replicate with software. I mean, maybe AI will come up with something, but I don't mean to trigger that conversation like so early, but I honestly, I don't think so. I think that this is like a physical phenomenon that you can't really imitate.
Yeah, I think speaking of fine art botanicals, I think one of my favorite shots of yours is of a dandelion, and it's got an absolutely black background, the stem, and then the outer petals, I don't know what you call the outer fluff, is all white, but then the center of this dandelion is reddish orange, and it's just an absolutely stunning image. Yeah.
I did some macro photography in my apartment during the pandemic. We were in lockdown, couldn't really go anywhere. So I was basically just picking up garbage outside my door, dandelions, leaves, seed heads, different things that I could bring, and just shooting them like right next to the window against a black background, just handheld. And those ended up being some of my favorite images. That I never really would have discovered if we hadn't had those conditions of like you're stuck at home and you're a landscape photographer, too bad. So I'm kind of glad that I had that period of limitation to check that out. But I agree, like, and sometimes what works best with the infrared is not the live foliage that's photosynthesizing and blowing out all your highlights. it's the vegetative matter that is like partly alive and partly dead. So you're getting kind of that mixed effect. For anyone out there that is having difficulty with macro infrared photography, I would suggest using something that's maybe only halfway alive or has got some mix to it.
Interesting. Yeah, I never really would have thought about that, sort of a mix of half live, half dead, because if I heard you right, it sort of transmits the light differently depending on its state of decay.
Yeah. So if you're using something that's got like, especially like seed heads, because they're weird and alien looking, and they're in some stage of going from green to brown.
Fascinating. So, go ahead, Jack.
I'm just gonna, just go back a little bit. Did you begin your photography career with infrared, or did that grow out of any kind of a background? And I don't like to use the
Oh,
word normal for it's a bad term, but when you first got into photography.
well, I've had a camera since I was a little kid, and I've rarely been without a camera, but I didn't really start taking it seriously until I discovered infrared in combination with really hating my day job and seeing if I could, and just like spending more and more time doing infrared and seeing how I could like switch my priorities. But I have a very creative background. I used to be a welder. I started
Wow.
working for a metal sculptor, took blacksmithing courses at Duke University. I did that
Wow.
for about
Huh.
7 years.
You can
I've been a
take a
cabinet.
blacksmithing course at Duke University.
Yeah, they have this little cabin in the woods with a bunch of forges. Yeah.
Wow.
Um,
Okay.
yeah, it's dirty work, but it's very fun.
I always wanted to, I could have majored in
In
blacksmithing, John.
blacksmithing, yeah, with a
What a
minor in
waste.
horseshoeing.
Getting a
It's never
music
too
degree.
late.
Yeah, that's right. The blacksmithing would be right above a degree in music, which is what I own. If anybody out there wanted to buy a diploma from Indiana, I have one here, little whiteout symbol.
Yeah.
Wow,
Um,
blacksmithing.
I've done a lot of other things. We were joking earlier about my name and like these hippie names in my family, but it means that the relevant part here is that I grew up homesteading and we were also poor. If you wanted stuff, you had to make it. So if I wanted like pretty dresses like little girls do, I had to make them. And then that kind of just bled into my adult life where I kept making my own clothes and then moved to making my own
Wow.
furniture.
Wow.
I paint, not actively at the moment, but I make my own paints from dried pigments. And
Wow.
so I've always had like things that I'm doing and making. Photography is really cool to me because you can end up with a finished product so quickly. It's not like making a quilt where you're going to spend 2,000 hours getting that one thing done. You go out in the morning and you can come back and process some images and have several things done that same day. It's amazing.
Yeah,
It
I
really
So
used
is.
to, I kid people, I said,
We
we had film. It used to be you had 3 days to figure out how many bad photographs you have. Now you have 3 hours and you know how many bad photographs you come back.
I know.
That's what a great background. Man, that's what
yeah,
a super creative
Well,
background.
yeah, I mean, we had this conversation a while ago on one of our episodes about living a creative life. And
Yeah.
it's not just creating art, but it's just how you go about your life and being creative through your days and thinking creatively and how you approach tasks and making your own stuff if you want in your case and it seems like you embody that really well, Rain. You've just always done that. Sounds like.
I'm sure there's other people out there doing what you do, Rain, but I don't, you're the only person I know that pretty much exclusively shoots infrared.
there are a
You know,
few folks who do
Tony
it,
and some
but
of the other
I would
people.
say it's a pretty small club. And I feel like infrared is kind of in a strange category among, say, landscape photographers. I think a lot of people don't necessarily view it as like quite on the same level, and it's okay with me. People can have whatever views they want, but I feel like they think it's like a really far out there novelty. And I notice that when people decide to dabble in it, they will not usually share, hey, this is an infrared photograph. They won't label it or anything like that. So I feel like we're kind of like put over here in this other box or something, which again is okay, but it's a really fascinating medium, and I am seeing more and more people pick it up. But
Yeah.
there's only a few people that do it like full time.
Well, I loved your comment that you made a little bit ago around how you through infrared, you see the world, but it's the world around us, but it's just slightly different. It's slightly off. So it's kind of
Yeah.
like tilting your head a little bit to the left. There's just something familiar yet not familiar about it. And I think that's intriguing to me because it's a new way to view this world around us. And I absolutely love it. I'm fascinated by it.
Yeah, I think, John,
I
the
find
other
that
thing too is that I think too many people try to be all things to all people, and we've talked with Cole Thompson, some other people, about just find out what you're good at and work on it. And you're a great example of that. And to your credit, I mean, that's, and I just find infrared photography to me right now as being really, really cool. It's something that I'd like to learn how to do someday. And I've never tried it because I know it takes, from talking to people like you and Tony and so many other people, and it takes time, and it takes time to learn how to see that way. And like when I go out to shoot panoramas, I like to shoot panorama landscapes. I go out with the intention of shooting panorama landscapes. I don't go out and say, well, if I find a panorama, I'll shoot. My mind has to be there. And I think for me anyhow, the type of photography that you do so well, you almost have to go out with that in mind and not try to be all things to all people. And to your credit, you've mastered that. It's really, really quite complimentary.
Well, those are very nice things to hear. I realize I'm like kind of at the beginning of my journey into photography, and I can be in love with an image that I take today, and then a month later I look back on it and I'm kind of embarrassed.
And that's a good thing, by the way. You agree, John?
It is. Oh yeah.
But
Yeah,
I
it
would
means
say
you're
with
growing.
infrared, yeah, and that's really like the thing about having a creative life, is that you're always growing, and you need to make so many mistakes that it doesn't bother you that you make mistakes. If you are not making mistakes, you're not really growing. And if you're making a lot of mistakes, then you become more and more comfortable with trying things because you're not concerned about trying to look right or trying to look like you know what you're doing. You're just trying more and more things. And I think that we're moving socially toward a lot of transparency, and all eyes are on you all the time. And so if you can get used to that, especially if you didn't grow up with that, but if you can get used to those eyes being on you all the time and leave those internal dialogues you're having about that behind you, then I think you can move ahead much more comfortably and more quickly, because you're less concerned, and you just need to keep working,
Less constrained as well by your own self talk.
Yeah.
Let me.
Ray, would you do me a favor?
Oh,
Someday soon, and John, I think you'll agree with me. Just in the short time we've been talking and hearing your background, and the fact that you've not been doing this a million years like John and I, you need to start writing some ideas down, and I really see a book in this. It's really
be an author.
a great perspective. Well, no, what she's got, John, is a great perspective.
Oh, hell yeah.
It's like we were talking with Guy. It's like that kid playing with toys, the little kids that are afraid to make a mistake. They're someone who hasn't been in this field for as many years and gets set in your ways and have problems adapting. Rain, you're doing great, man. You need to write some of this stuff down. I think you could help a lot of people.
Working on my writing discipline. I would say that like photography is a lot of fun, right? But it's really like about your butt being in the seat and doing the work.
Yeah.
And the same thing with writing, which I really want to do, but it's a lot less fun.
It
So I'm
is.
Well,
working on.
you'll find that the more professional, not hate that word, but the more your business grows and you get more
Mhm.
more well known and such, the time in your office is going to be almost greater sometimes than your time holding a camera. It's just
Mhm.
the way it
That
is.
is for
People won't know
sure.
that.
Yeah. Can I remark on something you said a minute ago, Jack? You're talking about, like one does not simply walk into Mordor with their infrared camera, but you kind of you can do that because when you take your first infrared image and you look at it on your screen or if you print it out, it's so amazing and so weird that you don't even care if it's a good photograph. You're so taken with the effect, and I this is what happened to me. I sometimes see it happen to others too, is that you just kind of like lose sight of composition and lighting and all these other elements because you just want to see what everything looks like in infrared. And so it's so much fun to go on that journey. And it's only like for me it was like months in before I started realizing like how terrible the photos were. But I'm totally okay with that. I like looking back on sort of the way I was seeing back then. But I think it's totally okay for people to go out and not know what they're doing and just give it a shot.
Yeah,
There's
no,
because
I don't
that is the
disagree.
thing that makes it so fun. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You definitely learn. As you were talking, Rain, it made me think of a maybe controversial question around, will the effect of IR compensate for a not great composition, just wowing yourself or wowing other people just with the effect. And, you lose sight of you don't have to be as strong in your compositional aspects.
I think that it does not compensate, but it's easy in your head to go there, and that is to your detriment. And
Yeah.
I think it's as much as I think it's important to have fun, it's also important to look at your stuff with a critical eye and be honest.
Yep.
There's this little voice in my head that's always like, "Is that your best work?"
hmm Hey, let me touch real quick just on the we started going down the road of going out for capturing these photographs. When you
Mhm.
process your IR photographs, how is that different for those that don't know? How is that different from processing just normal photography?
There are a lot of there are a few specific steps that are normally done in infrared photography. I wouldn't say you have to do anything, but it's really normal to apply a custom camera profile that you have created separately in the DNG profile editor, and then do a channel swap on your images. And white balancing is a huge deal, and you're going to do that multiple times. For me, because I really love color and working with false color, there are a lot of different steps that I take. I would say I'm a kind of in an exploratory phase with Photoshop, or a learning phase to learn every single way that they offer to manipulate color so that I can do more and interesting things with those images. You have so many options for which way you want to take your infrared image in, whether it's just black and white or one of these like channel swapping um, operations you can do where you want your foliage to be either white or gold, which are classic, or you want to turn them pink or something else like I often do. So I will often process an image like very quickly in kind of 6 different directions and then choose the one that I like, or maybe
Mhm.
use masks to combine them a little bit. Um, the steps that I mentioned at first are going to be unfamiliar to most people, like applying a custom profile and the channel swaps. I have a infrared photography class out on Kelby One that just came out a week or two ago that explains in a series of short lessons all of these different steps. It tells you every single thing that you need to do in order to process your infrared images in a way that you like. So if people want to understand more about how to do that or try it out, they can maybe go check out that class. And they can also go to the blog on my website, which has posts about all of the equipment that I use and also the equipment that I recommend people start with.
Outstanding. And folks, I'll put a link up on our show notes for the Kelby One course as well as Rain's website. So please do check that out. I think she's a fantastic teacher. I think this class, if you've ever wanted to get into IR, this would be a fantastic way to get started with this. So yeah, because channel swapping, that kind of stuff is not something that I traditionally do in my photo processing. So yeah, even something like that would be new to me. The thing that kind of struck me as you were talking too, where in traditional landscape photography, we're sort of constrained by the reality in a way. I mean, I have like in the Palouse, right? The grass has to be green, the sky has to be blue. That's just sort of the way it is, unless I'm shooting in monochrome. But with IR, all of those societal and self-imposed rules are gone. Kind of to your point, you can make stuff pink.
And it's kind of come up, now we're starting to wonder what's real and what's not real about all these images that we see. And I see people having detailed discussions about the ethics of removing a branch that doesn't belong or ruins the composition or something. I feel much less put out about that. Like, I don't feel like I have to tell anyone that I removed a branch out of the pink landscape because it's a pink landscape. And we're already on board that this is not totally a realistic representation. Yeah. So there's a lot of freedom, but also you can end up with like, so many options as can be kind of stressful. You go to the cereal aisle and there are like 59 different cereals that you could choose and you're just hungry. So I think it can be really helpful to sort of like pick a narrow path at first and just see how you do with like black and white and how that works for you. But it's funny is when I'm processing my images in black and white, that's where I get option paralysis. There's so many different ways that you can make this image have an entirely different character. I find color somehow much more straightforward.
Yeah, I would think color would be even harder, but because you have that whole palette instead of just shades of gray. But that's fantastic. Yeah, I like the freedom.
Well, Jack said we weren't going to say normal here. So yeah, I like the freedom too, but nothing normal here.
It's the whole discussion of what's real and what's not real is being it got real popular when color film started. I just wrote this article on my blog today on AI. I got a lot of calls and emails from people. What do you think about AI? And I got sick and tired of doing this, so I just wrote a quick thing. Color film showed up about 1940. It showed up for cinema use, and then it got adapted into regular film use like we know it. And it was a big upheaval. And it caused problems. Bresson actually made the quote. He says, "Color photography is bullshit," and that was when was it, 1940 something. And then HDR showed up a few years ago, even though it started in the 1850s. People don't know that. And we had John Wright. We had this big controversy. Is that HDR? Is it blending? And now the technology's got so good, you could blend images. Almost don't even need a graduate ND much anymore. And then that kind of went away. And now this AI thing shows up, and everybody's going, "Oh, how are we going to know what's real and not?" Well, I made it in my article. I made the comment: if a giraffe is standing in the middle of the Rogue River, it's AI. And if somebody wants to do that, it's okay. Just say what you did. And people have this big thing about making things natural in the way we see it. And so many things we do are not the way we see it. We don't see it 200 millimeters. It's not natural. So what you're doing is just frankly, I've been doing this a lot of years. I couldn't begin to do what you do. I'm very, very impressed and I'm quite blown away. It, it's it, it's a discipline, and it takes discipline to do it. And it's not a question of whether it's natural or not natural. It's art. It's an expression of what you're trying to say, and that's what's important in life and in photography. You know,
I still feel the same kind of, Jack, you talk on your website about having like a connection to the place
Mhm.
that you're photographing. And I feel that too. And I feel it somehow that by taking the images in infrared, it almost makes it a little bit more personal to me.
Mhm.
Um, so some of the places that I like to photograph most are extremely mundane. Just in our like the East Bay has like more parkland than anywhere else in the US.
Mhm.
Just all these rolling green hills and there's just nothing out there. It's just like super boring and barren and like Point Reyes just looks like this barren wasteland if you're not used to it.
Oh
And I
no,
love these places. Like I
yeah,
think they are just amazing. And
yeah,
the
yeah.
infrared kind of gives me that more like I'm looking at you in this very special way. So I identify a lot with what you're saying about that.
Well, you do a great job at it. I'm, John, am I too old to learn this? What do
No,
you
you're
think?
never too old, Jack. You're never too
Good.
old.
Wow.
No,
I'm,
I
I'm,
think I think
Well,
that's probably the biggest lesson. Just IR as well as traditional photography. I think for us to grow as artists, we have to let go of preconceived notions of I should be doing this or it should look like this. And that's one of the beauties about maybe exploring other disciplines, macro, IR, astrophotography, all these other things that help us sort of break some of our kind of self-imposed constraints that are holding us back creatively as artists.
I
correct.
agree with that totally. I sometimes recommend to people when they tell me they feel like they're in a rut, go do something completely different. Like
Mm.
take that welding class, or it doesn't even have to be like a full on like semester course. You can go learn something on YouTube that's just outside of your normal area. And you're going to, I don't know, create new neural pathways, or you're just going to start thinking different thoughts. And those thoughts are going to influence your main things. So it's really important to keep a variety in your life and go see people and go to different landscapes and try new things. I totally agree with that. And I hope that one day when I'm as old as you guys, my photos will look
Hey
out.
now,
John,
I'm
that's
not
going to be
that
a,
older
You
than
can
you.
totally
that's going to
edit
be
that
a
out.
long,
Jack's
that's
the
a
old one.
long
I'm
ways
still young.
away. That's a long ways away. Man, that's,
Feel free to
I
edit
just I
that
just
out.
don't have hair.
no,
That's
that's
all.
great. Hey, this is not a gear centric podcast. We don't recommend gear. We don't really get into why one thing's better than another, but I can guarantee you we do have listeners that are going to say, what kind of camera does Rain use, and how did you convert it, and what's happening gear wise briefly with you?
So I'll tell you two things. If you want to try infrared photography, just take your regular camera and get a Hoya R72 infrared filter for your lens
Hmm.
and just put that sucker on there and go take some pictures. You are now an infrared
Just writing
photographer.
this down. Did you see? He's writing
Yeah, I
it down.
am.
Yeah. Just the Hoya R72. What that is a
You've created a
700
monster here, I think.
I know I've called B&H. I'm like, you
Yeah,
guys need to stock
yeah,
up on
yeah,
these.
yeah.
That's funny.
It's really that simple if you want to give it a whirl. And that's what I recommend that everybody do if they're curious, but it sounds like it's like too much or they're not sure if they'll like it. This is how you try it out. And it's like $50 and that's not a bad deal. If you do what I did, where you suddenly get like tunnel vision and you go, whoa, I want to do this for the rest of my life. Then you send your camera off to a place like Kolari or LifePixel, and you get a full spectrum conversion, which means that they remove the IR filter that comes in your camera from the factory and just put a clear piece of glass over it. Now you can shoot infrared, you can shoot regular color just like you were before. And you can, there's a whole range of different wavelengths that you can shoot infrared at. And say from the low end of like 550 to the high end of like 850 nanometers. And without getting too technical, that range just gives you some different options for how much infrared light you're getting compared to how much regular light. And that will determine kind of that glowy effect, how much you have of that. And then the visible light gives you color. So you can kind of balance these two qualities by choosing a different filter. And you can, with your full spectrum converted camera, you can shoot any spectrum you want to. So it's a little bit of a commitment. It is absolutely going to void the warranty on your camera. So maybe choose an old one. You can also get a used infrared camera off of like KEH, and I think even B&H has a couple used ones now and then. So there's like this whole range of very simple to like the full commitment.
Cool.
Fantastic.
Well,
does the megapixel wars that are happening throughout the industry always, everybody's got to have the most megapixels. How important is, camera specifications or the megapixels in IR? Does it apply the same as regular photography?
I think the question comes down to whether you print your work.
Yeah.
And if you print your work, then you probably want, more megapixels, but not necessarily, because now with software like Topaz, Giga AI,
Topaz, yep.
I can take some of my original infrared images that I thought I couldn't print larger than 8x10 or 17x22 or whatever. And now I can blow those up beautifully to whatever size I want. Mm-hmm. So I'm really happy with how that software has worked for me. So I think it really depends on whether you're going to print your work and how big you're going to print it, and if you want software or no software. Yeah. I don't think people should be held back. I hear some people say that photography, especially landscape photography, travel photography, that's a rich man's endeavor. I can't afford it, so I'm locked out. And I just no, you have a phone that has more megapixels than my camera did just 5 years ago. You can turn your phone into an infrared camera. I show you how in my Kelby One class. You really there are no limits. And I actually think that the more constraints you have on your budget and your time, the more you have to bring your creativity to bear on what you're doing. And so I actually think that constraints are better than no constraints. If you can just buy all the toys in the world, you don't really develop, because you're always leaning on, or you're trying to think of oh gosh, what can I do with this new tool or this, new lens or something.
Yeah. Necessity is the mother of invention, as they used to say.
We've got
Sean and I've gotten into this.
We've gotten into this gear discussion. I think in our early podcasts, we talked about gear maybe a little bit, and we learned real fast that, like we tell our workshop folks, Rain, if your images are bad, it ain't the gear,
Yeah. And you're going to eventually, if you're looking at other people's work, you're eventually going to see some of the most incredible work you've ever seen and realize that someone is doing that with a 10-year-old cell phone or something like that. And you're going to feel some feelings about your own work when you see what a person with these extreme limitations is.
We did workshops. And, you know, it's an amazing thing that, you know, we take these people out in the middle of the night and tell them to stand here. The sun's going to come up, and take a photograph. And we get back and look at them. And Sean and I look at each other and go, oh my God, this stuff's better than what we're doing.
Yeah.
You know, it's a great thing. And it's a great form of expression. And as long as you're doing what, telling your story through your art, and Rain, you do it so well. I think that's what's important. That's where credibility is these days, you know.
Bad.
Wow.
So, Rain, any final words you'd like to leave with our folks?
We need to talk about what you're doing. Is there anything?
Yeah.
I know you did the Kelby one, and you've got some great prints for sale online.
Thank you.
Anything else that you can shamelessly plug for yourself? John and I do it all the time. It's okay.
So I really like being out in the field taking photos, and I am switching gears right now to be, it needs to be a little bit more business minded. So I've just read like 15 marketing books. That's what I've been up to. I think about things in terms of like creatively, what do I want to do? And then what do I want to do in terms of sharing and communicating with more people and connecting with people. I definitely want to be doing the latter. I think that I am a very like solitary loner kind of person, but I really like people a lot. And I'd like to be doing more things that involve more people, workshops and classes, and even just podcasts with you guys. I love this stuff. So
you should. You have a
so I want to be
great demeanor. I think you'd make a great teacher.
Thank you. On the creative side, I'm not getting tired of infrared at all, and I'm going to keep doing that. I just got some equipment to play around with UV photography. That's an indoor thing because you need darkness, and I like having options for when I can get out and do a little traveling and things for when I stay home. So that's something that's on my horizon that I want to check out. But what I think, if I can say something to everyone who's listening to this, it's if you want to try something, whether it's infrared or photography or anything at all in your life, take your shot and go do it, because you don't know how many chances you have. You don't know how much time you have. It could be very long, but it could be very short. And your time is now. So
Well
go do
said.
it.
Well said.
Well said.
Yep.
Well
Jack and I
said.
were just talking before you got on, Rain, how quickly life goes by, and not to be a downer for folks, but it just is. It's a great reminder to me to go out and seize the day and seize every opportunity you can when you can, because this experience goes by so fast.
Yeah, it does.
Yep.
Yeah.
It does. And I'm going to tell you how old I am, right? When I got in this business, when I was trying to
This was
sell
before color
photo
film.
workshops, well, almost, but there was no internet. Picture that. I didn't have the internet. There was
Well, I didn't grow up with the internet either.
but trying to market and get your word out, and man, now it's like an overload. You don't know which way to turn, and you have to buy books. You have to find out how to do it,
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
John, I got to tell you, you hit a home run. Rain, I did not meet you before today. And John says, well, I talked to somebody about infrared, and I think it'd make a great podcast. John, it kills me to say this, but you hit a home run on this one.
It was a pleasure. I was just happy. I mean, part of the joy of this podcast too is being able. It's a great excuse to bring people on to meet them, and learn more about them. And that's kind of our whole point of doing this, is to bring on cool, fun folks and get to meet them. And Rain, I'm really, really happy that you were able to make it today. Thank you.
And John's going to put some show notes up, folks who are still here listening. If you have gone off and bought an infrared camera at KEH. But there'll be some show notes. You'll know how to find Rain and what she's doing. and why you should get to know her work and what she's doing. It'll be good for you.
Yeah.
And
Well, you
thank you
guys,
for being here.
I'm really honored that you asked me to be on because I looked at some of the names that you've had on before me and it's like, oh,
You're following Guy Tal, by the way.
Yeah, you are.
There you go.
I saw that and I was
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
is this the right Rain Hayes?
Yeah, that's why 60 Minutes always followed the football game, and that helped their ratings. So hopefully people will find out who you are, and because man, I'll tell you,
You do great work.
Well,
it takes a lot to blow me away these days, but I'm very impressed. Thank you for being here.
I appreciate your time and all these kind things that you said. I don't deserve half of it, but I do really appreciate it because there's still really nice things to hear. So thank
Someday
you
I'm gonna
so much.
someday, John, we should
You're
have
welcome.
somebody on that we know really well that can take it, and we won't tell anybody what we're doing. We'll just bash them for a half an hour.
Mike, yep.
Your
I
work
think we
is
got to do
crap.
that.
What are you doing?
Yeah.
God.
Well, that's kind of like that old joke that I know we got to go, but that old joke where during one of our image reviews, Rain, sometimes either Jack or I'll put one of our own images in the image review that we're doing with our folks, and just spend 5 minutes. Yeah, just spend 5 minutes ripping this image apart brutally, and everybody's jaws are on the floor that we could be so harsh, and then it's my image.
Who's this? And nobody raises their hand. Just okay. I know it's a really crappy image, but you're all afraid to say it's okay. So nobody else in the room, and nobody raised their hand. We just rip it. It's great.
Yeah, it's a fun workshop leader joke.
If you ever need some support or a third player in your pranks or a stooge or whatever, please consider me.
Great.
Well,
We'll do. All right, folks. I think we've taken up enough of your time today. Thank you so much for listening. It's been an absolute joy having you here, Rain. And yeah, just keep
what was
shooting.
That filter again? A Hoya 72?
The Hoya R72. It's the pirate filter, the R72.
I wrote it down, Jack, so I'll send it to you.
The B&H will get 9 orders here in the next 2 days.
Yeah. All right, folks. Well, any questions, comments, send it to wetalkphoto@gmail.com and check out Rain's work.
YouTube.
And with that, I want to wish you a
and this is on YouTube
wonderful day.
for those of you. John, tell them about YouTube.
That this is on video as well as service.
No.
For
those of you who are listening on audio, we've trained people to listen to audio, but you can now go to YouTube and you can type in "We Talk Photo" and you could see Rain and John and I do this podcast.
You betcha. All right, Rain. Thank you.
Have
a wonderful day.
Okay.
You as well. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.